Hello everyone, welcome to our Egyptian online seminar group. First, can phones off. Then if you have any questions, you can ask our speaker during his presentation or after his presentation. I have great pleasure of welcoming you, Professor Andrei Filip. Andrei Filip is a professor of financial reporting at IESEG School of Management, holding a Ph.D. in international accounting from the University of Geneva. Andrea main research interested are in institutional setting and financial reporting quality. He is recognized as an expert in international accounting, and he worked on several projects with the international IASB and the French ANC accounting standard setter. He has published in top-ranking journals in accounting, including Contemporary Accounting Research, Journal of Corporate Finance, European Accounting Review, Journal of Business Finance and Accounting, the International Journal of Accounting, and Journal of International Accounting Research, and he is currently editor-in-chief of Accounting in Europe. Now we will start our seminar with dear Professor Andrei Philip.
So first of all, thank you very much for the invitation. I have checked a little bit like the list of guest speakers that you had and the impressive numbers, and I understand there are more than 200 participants in this like the Egyptian online seminar. So I'm very honored for the invitation to present today. And I'm particularly happy because I think it's a nice opportunity that, well, after COVID, when we started these online seminars, we should maybe like keep the trend and continue like to share research and to discuss research in such a nice setting. Now, you asked me to present a paper and I hesitated, but at the end of the day, I decided to take a risk and to get out of my zone of comfort in one way, in the sense that I'm going to present an audit paper and I'm not an audit researcher. I'm not an audit researcher, but my two co-authors, they are. And the paper that I'm going to present today, it's co-authored with one of my colleagues at IESEG, like Angeni, and it's co-authored with Emeline Deneuve, who was actually our former PhD students, and this paper is coming from her PhD thesis, and we're still working, some years after, we're still working on it to improve the paper, and Emeline, she's currently like at HEC Montreal. And it's a perfect timing to present basically this paper because we're working on the project, like we're currently in thinking about and trying to improve the project and trying to ameliorate it. And in the review process, we have some tough comments, so we're trying to integrate the comments and try to see like if we can push the paper in a better way. So every other comment that basically like you had on the paper, if you have questions or if you have comments or suggestions or so, we're more than happy to take them in. And please feel free to just jump in the conversation and ask questions at any moment in time, basically like during the presentation. We're currently, as I mentioned before, like we're currently about to like redraft the paper. There's a previous version of the paper online, but the results are that I'm going to present today are slightly different because we're revisiting and redrafting, revamping basically the project that we actually have. So what is the project about? And we're looking basically at the key audit matters, and we're looking in a very granular way at the key audit matters. And we're trying to investigate basically like whether this new type of disclosures, they do have informative value for the users out of it. And we're basically looking, most importantly, we're focusing basically on this dissimilarity, like how different are basically this new disclosures in time and in between industry peers. Now, a few words maybe to start with about key audit matters. And I think that especially people who are like in audit, they know exactly what these key audit matters are. It's a big change that came up like some time ago, like in the audit reporting. So I would qualify it as the biggest change like in the over 70 years. And why is it a big change? Because before, like basically the auditor's report was basically like black or white. Now with the key audit matters, it's coming basically from like a request of more informative value in the audit report. And informative value in the audit report in the sense that people wanted to see like to open a little bit the black box and wanted to see like what is it exactly like in the audit report and what are auditors actually doing. And the key audit matters, like our sample is based in the UK. There were some like different types of versions like even before. But the key audit matters is basically like a risk-based assessment from the auditor's point of view. And the standard is clear about it. It's like the auditor, they should write the key audit matters in their own words. And they should basically identify the risk of material misstatements and based on a professional judgment and significant events, transactions, and other control deficiencies that may occur basically in the company. And they should basically describe this part of risk like in this key audit matters. And usually the key audit matter they have, and I insist on it at the beginning, they have basically two parts. One part is a risk description, when they describe basically like the risk of material misstatement that they actually see like in the financial statements. And the second part, the auditor response, in which they basically say what they have done to approach this risk and how they basically like dealt with this type of risk like in their audit activities. For this paper, we're going to focus mostly like on this risk description. And why? Because again, we're looking at, are these comes informative? Does somebody care about this comes in one way, in a provocative way saying it? So, and we think that investors, we're looking from an investor's perspective. So investors, if they would react and if they would care about something, it's about this risk description part. So this is the part where we're basically focusing on this paper. And it is most likely that investors' needs are basically fulfilled in this risk description part of the CAM. I do want to highlight from the beginning that this comes like they are encouraged like by the standard that auditors should basically write the CAMs in their own words. So it should be like specific, what do they actually see, and a description of the risk that they actually encountered in the financial statements. Now, how do we motivate the paper? And that's exactly out, because it is this new regulation imposed basically like some new disclosures from the side of the auditor. Before it was like one-page report. Now it's becoming longer, and they have like more information available basically in the audit report. And it's in a way like a conflict, because like they are over, like the CAMs have been implemented for more than a decade now. And there's still a debate about like, are they informative or not? And if you look a little bit in the literature, like mostly experimental studies, they basically conclude that yes, key audit matters, they do have a value for the investors, like in an experimental setting, and you have several studies that are like looking it out of it or so. However, if you look at archival research and mostly like empirical research, the evidence, I would say that the jury is still out there deliberating. Like the evidence is at best mixed. So some say like, yeah, they do have some information content. Some fail to find results like out of it, like for the comes out. And what we are thinking, and where we think that we contribute with our paper at the end of the day, that this mixed findings, I think that we need to look closer at them, and we try to understand in one way to explain why do we have like so weak evidence for informative content of the key audit matters. There have been, and I think that there is a need to understand like the conditions when these disclosures, additional disclosures by the auditors, are basically like informative for the market participants. The question that we're basically asking, and that's basically out, it's exactly this, like under which conditions like are basically like this key audit matters informative. And if you think a little bit like, and this key audit matters, and our sample, our paper is come back to this, is based on the UK. They showed up in UK, but then like more and more jurisdictions started adopting it. The US adopted it like in several years ago. Like they changed the name. It's not key audit matter, it's critical audit matters, but it's like more or less the same. So at the end of the day, I think that the question is legitimate, like we're complementing the literature that is finding like a little bit like mixed evidence and trying to dig deeper a little bit with a more granular analysis under the conditions under which the key audit matters are basically informative. And if you think about it, like these are disclosures made by the auditors about the audit process, but per se, the question is relevant also because we can even ask the question like, should key audit matters be relevant? Because at the end of the day, like the auditors are not supposed to disclose new information to the market. So they are not going to say, hey, the company is hiding something and this is what I found in addition to the financial statements. The key audit matters are based on the financial statements. So the information is already disclosed in the financial statements. What the key audit matters do is they basically enhance a risk of material misstatements that they find in the financial statements. So it's not new information. It's simply that the auditors, they flag certain type of risks that they encountered in their audit process. And the key question is like, okay, is it relevant for investors to know like where are the risks of material misstatements in the eyes of the auditors? And again, the auditors have the freedom to establish the number of key audit matters, to what they actually say about key audit matters is kind of flexible. So they have kind of a freedom. So the question is like, should it be informative for the investors or not? Like basically this key audit matters. If we look a little bit like at the literature reviews, because there were some papers that started to look a little bit like at the informativeness of key audit matters, and I'm saying comes with a C or comes with a K, depending like on the context in which it was. And if you think like, how can you basically investigate this informativeness of key audit matters? And there's a bunch of papers that basically looked at the pre-post study. So they look like how were the things before and how are the things basically like after, like the implementation of this new regulation. And you have certain papers that like basically like for instance, the first one is looking in the US when they find some evidence that basically, okay, although the auditor is not disclosing new information, the fact that he's flagging a certain type of information makes the company to change the footnotes that the auditors referred to. Like in the subsequent years, the companies are going to basically like react to it and like change the footnotes, the disclosure that they provide basically in the footnotes. Overall, like the result, however, and this is why I'm saying that the evidence is mixed, like even in this pre-post setting, that critical audit matters disclosure do not seem to be on average, do not seem to be informative to the market. So the market does not react to this type of information. I would say like to this type of enhancement of information that you actually find in the financial statements. But they do find specific circumstances when the critical auditor matters are actually informative. And what do they actually find? They look at the number of comes, and if the number of critical audit matters deviates from expectations, so it's like higher or lower compared to the expectations, then the market is basically reacting to the number of critical audit matters that the auditor is disclosing. And also like the market seems to react when the critical audit matters are disclosed in areas that you would not expect to have a critical audit matters on it. Now, this is the US evidence. And again, we're like in a pre-post study, like how was it before and how is the market reacting? There's also evidence like in the UK, where you have like the critical audit matters, like you have a paper that is showing that basically critical audit matters. This is a null result paper, if you want, in the sense that they do not provide information investors, additional information to the investors. It seems that the critical audit key audit matters, they do not have an impact on the audit fees, and there's no link, no association basically with audit quality, either like in the UK setting. And again, some other which encourage like some other authors to investigate again, like why is this actually happening? Why is the market not reacting to this? And the obvious answer to this, and I mentioned it from the beginning, is that yes, but because actually the market already incorporated information that was available in the financial statements. If you look, however, like getting a little bit closer to what we're doing there, a bunch of papers are looking like, okay, maybe it's just boilerplate disclosure. Maybe it's like nothing specific into it, but maybe like if you go like a little bit at the content of this comes, maybe the wording of this come and the way information is disclosed, that can have an impact on the market reaction. And you have like, again, like a very nice study like on a Taiwanese setting. And what they look at generic tetragrams, like what is captured through, like what they want to do in this paper is to capture what is client specific information in income disclosures. And they look basically like at this tetragrams, this feature of the language. And what they find is that lower financial reporting quality is actually like for client specific information in come disclosures. Now, also like the others, they are looking like there's a bunch of papers that started looking at linguistic characteristics, and especially like what type of comes and how do they, and we're getting closer to this type of papers. And people have started evaluating like the readability, the evaluative content, the visual aids, and all this. It seems that they are not informative basically like to the investors. However, like when they look a little bit closer to quantitative words, so if the auditor is using like words like percentage, times, currencies, the market seems to react to this. And while qualitative words, such as names or locations or so, the market does not seem to react to it. And finally, the closest papers to what we're trying to do, there's in the US context, there's a paper, it's a working paper that is looking at like distinct and more diverse scam. And again, on average, there's no reaction, but they look at like topical distinctiveness. If the topics of the CAM that you, the key audit, critical audit matters that you disclose, if they fall outside what's used in the industries, what the industry piece are basically doing, in that case, like the market reacts to the critical audit matter. And lexical diversity, like if you use specific words, unique words, in that case, again, like the market seems to react like to the information included in the critical audit matters. But at the end of the day, if you look at this literature, like this mixed literature in one sense, like evidence, I would say, and again, maybe I would not write, but I would say it seems that overall, like there are no results. And we know that in research, it's difficult to sell no results paper. And to sell this no results paper, most of the studies, at least if you look at them, they say like, okay, there's overall on average, there's no effect. But in certain type of circumstances with certain type of things, there are certain results, and we do actually have. And this is exactly what we're trying to contribute. We're trying to a little bit explain, we're basing like our hypothesis on the fact that the findings on the informativeness of critical audit matters in the US or key audit matters like in the UK are the findings are very mixed. And this is where we're trying to look a little bit like to see like, okay, under which circumstances and what could explain in our view like this null results that you're actually having basically in the literature. And it is important to look at the language, like at language characteristics, the way auditors are basically like phrasing the key audit matters, because the auditors are from the beginning incited to encourage, they are encouraged to write the key audit matters in their own words. So to explain the risk of material misstatements that you actually find in the financial statements. And uh, again, the tension, if you want, it's either because they what could explain the fact that we don't find information. Maybe it's true, like maybe like the key audit matters, like at the end of the day, they don't disclose new information, and because they don't disclose new information to the market does not react to it, because it reacts basically to information that is already available on the market. Or you also have like this literature that is showing that auditors are basically like avoid to stick out, so avoid to use like specific terms. So you have like a kind of a mimetic, and they some people are saying that even auditors might use like some templates to write the comes. So from this type of practice, again, how would you expect in one way for the key audit matters to be informative to the market? Like that's a debate that we're trying to develop, and but what we are basically saying, and again, and what we're trying to test is that at the end of the day, like we think that there are two dimensions for and two conditions, if you want, for a critical audit, for a key audit matter to be informative to the market. And the first one, it's like, well, yes, but if the key audit matter, in order for it to be informative, it has to be different compared to what you basically said last year. Because if it's the same information is actually like disclosed every year, this can explain away the fact that the market does not react to this type of information that you actually have. If you copy paste, the auditors copy paste the text from the previous year to the current year, well, then the market is not reacting. So for a key fundamental thing like for the market to react to the key audit matters is that the risk disclosed has to be like, and the risk description has to be dissimilar compared to what they have actually said in the previous year. But that's not enough. What we're actually like thinking as well, like, okay, good, maybe I say something differently compared to the previous year, but it also has to be like you have to stick out to what is in the industry. So when you're talking about like the risk that is basically, and you say like as an auditor, you use basically like the same type of text for all the industry peers, all your competitors, like basically in the industry. Well, it maybe does not make sense, the fact that, well, the market does not react because the information is already out there, like from all your peers that you actually have. And what we do believe actually is that actually like it's the combination of the two that is making critical auditors, key audit matters like informative to the market. In other words, what we are actually doing is that what we're trying to test, that we're introducing this type of temporal dimension. And this temporal dimension, again, what I said before, it's like if I repeat every year what I said basically like in the previous year, there I that's what I'm saying. It's like I'm not surprised that the market is basically not reacting. If I'm saying the same thing, if I repeat for every, the auditors say the same thing for every company in the same industry, there's no surprise that the company is like the market is basically not reacting. So the key audit matters are not informative. But what we're focusing more, and this is where we believe that the contribution of this paper is, we're focusing more like on the cross section of the two. So key audit matters should be informative, both when I say something different compared to what I said in the past, and both in the same at the same time if I say something different compared to the peers that I actually have in the industry. So this is where we're actually like focusing, and what we are trying to test basically in this paper empirically by using like the UK setting. Maybe I'll stop here. If you have questions or comments on the theoretical part of the paper, I'll go more on the measures and empirics after. No comments? No. I'll I'll move on in that case, like on our metrics, like on the empirical part. And I'm happy I'm just seeing now that actually like Emlyn joined, one of the co-authors. So if you have questions about like the technical part, like of how exactly these metrics were computed, Emlyn will be happily join in, like to join in the conversation. The thing is like, okay, how do I measure actually? And that's the granular part of this, what we're trying to do is like, how do you measure actually like these differences in wording in the time dissimilarity and the dissimilarity compared to the peers? And what we're looking, and this is nice because we're looking at, and one of the strong parts of our paper is that we're looking at the each type of risk separately. And each type of risk separately, we identify this by CUM separately. So what we're looking like the CUM that is disclosed this year on the same topic. How does it compare to the CUM disclosed basically to the same by the same firm the year just before? And what we do, we're looking like at the text, and we're looking like the cosine similarity. So we're measuring the difference basically like in the textual disclosure in between the past year and the current year. And because a firm is having basically like different types of disclosures, so different types of key audit matters, what we do, we're then averaging for per firm and per year, like all this type of like similarity indexes that we actually computing like at the level of each company. And again, we have some tests with the continuous variables as well, but for the ease of the interpretation of the results, we're simply splitting what we focus. We want basically like to capture here firms that are, in my words before, are saying something different compared to what they said last year. So we're actually looking like at the first 1/3 out of the sample, so the upper tercile like out of the sample, because we think that these firms are basically the ones that are like presented different disclosures compared basically to the last year. And for the ease of interpretation, we're just going to use a 0-1 in our regressions, but 0-1 dummy in our regressions. But most of the results they hold, even if they use a continuous variable, or even if we do different splits basically in the sample. So basically this type of index that we're actually like computing is supposed to, and as a visual representation, is comparing the text like for the same type of CUM, for the same firm, is how much they basically disclosed like in what they disclosed in the past year, and what they are actually disclosing in this year. And it's looking type like how similar are basically these texts like for the same firm, for the same risk, and then everything averaged. On average, like this index should measure like, okay, how much are the CAM disclosures different compared to what the auditor said about the company in the past year. Now, similar like to capture like maybe, and that's another strength, and when we're a little bit different compared to the literature, we're looking a little bit like at industry peers. So we're saying, okay, we're talking here about like auditor disclosure about risk of material misstatements. A good part of this risk are based like they are the same basically in the industry. So we should compare basically like the CUM disclosures that compared to the competitors of the firm. And in a similar way, we're looking like at the level of, for each type of key audit matter, for each CUM disclosure, we're like identifying the competitors in the industry for the same year that have a similar CUM on the same topic. And we're computing again like a similarity metric, like how different are my disclosures compared to the industry peers. And we average this at the level of the CUM, and then we average this again like for each CUM like per firm and year level. And similar, what is supposed to measure, similar to the previous metric, what is supposed to measure basically this metric is to measure like how much different is what the auditors are saying about the company compared to what they are saying about the industry peers. Like how much they are saying different things, the auditors, like compared to the industry peers. And again, like as a visual representation, you have like always we're focusing on the same type of risk. So we're identifying the same key audit matter, and we're simply looking like basically like different firms in the same direct competitors in the same industries, how much the wording is basically different. And again, this is not about like new information. The key audit matters, they should not disclose new information on the market, but simply the perception of the auditors on the risk of material misstatements that you have basically like on the competitors. And if you want like this type of dissimilarity metrics, they measure in one way like the company specific information that you have like basically in the key audit matters. Now we have this type of proxies of similarities, one that is capturing like the time dimension, the second one that is capturing like the industry peer dimensions. So like how different are the disclosures made by the auditors compared to the competitors, my competitors. And again, for what we want a dissimilarity index. Dissimilarity because it's like how different am I? This is what we think. It's a little bit like informative. So it's like the dissimilarity index is 1 minus the similarity index, and these two type of dimensions and are basically going to capture like the two main ideas that we wanted to have in the paper, which is exactly like how different am I compared to what I have said basically in the past year, and how different am I compared to the industry peers. And the strength of this metrics is exactly that we refer, basically we're trying to keep like everything else being equal, especially the risk. We're referring basically to the same type of risk that you actually have like in the financial statements. So if I talk about, for instance, about revenue recognition in a hotel industry or so, there are two different companies that are talking about the same type of risk, which is the revenue recognition risk that you actually have. Okay, so I hope it's clear what we're trying to do a little bit, like with this type of metrics. Now we're looking at the British firms, the UK firms, and what's the idea of this UK firms is that we're trying to the key audit matters appeared first in the UK, so we're trying to have the longest possible time period. And we stopped at 2020 because, well, COVID probably changed the risk of material misstatement and the risk that you actually had in the company. So the longest time period is actually kind of short. So it's first evidence from 2014 and 2019. And during this period, like the premium listed non-financial firms on the London Stock Exchange, they had to disclose like basically like the key audit matters in the financial statements. And what we do, we're trying to see again, we're taking a market measure. So like, is the market reaction, the absolute cumulated abnormal return? And we regress this basically like on the dissimilarity in time separately, on a dissimilarity compared to the peers, and like the interaction in between the two. And if you think a little bit, like beta 1 in this equation is measuring like if I say something different compared to the past year, is it like basically like informative to the market? Like beta 2 is measuring like if I say something different compared to the peers, is the market reacting to it? And finally, our main hypothesis is like on beta 3, when I say something different compared to what I said in the past year and something different compared to the peers, this is where we believe it's like is explaining basically like when the market should basically react. Now, the problem with this is that key audit matters are disclosed in the moment of the publication of the annual report. And there's a bunch of information coming to the market at the same time, because that you have like all this noise produced by the annual report. So it's very hard to disentangle exactly like the informative nature of the key audit matters. We do what's best we can do, and we follow like previous literature. So we're trying to control at very least, like for the profitability of the firms, for the risk, for the earnings news included in like in the annual report, like with the financial information, what is the annual report about, the financial information contained in the annual report. That's the best that we can do. We're simply like controlling for it. We're also like controlling by for the number of days, the delay in between like the moment when the earnings are announced and the moment of the publication of the annual report, like again, longer, shorter time periods like that can influence basically like the market reaction. And coming back to the critical audit matter, key audit matters, we're controlling like for the length of the key audit matters, and we're controlling as well for the number of the key audit matters. Because it's something else if a firm is having 2 key audit matters or a firm is having 5 key audit matters. We're also controlling like for the the audit characteristics, the industry expertise of the auditor, like the busy season, the typical thing that the audit literature is doing, like basically in this part. And more interesting, like what we're trying to control for the fact that, okay, key audit matters, and this goes back to the idea that key audit matters is not bringing new information to the market. Key audit matters is simply like highlighting an information that the market already has. So what we are trying to control here for, and we're trying to see like if the key audit matter specifically refers to a financial statement footnote. So it's footnote number 3 or footnote on, so the auditor is saying like, take care in the note on revenue recognition, there's a risk of material misstatement there. So we're using a dummy variable if it directly references a footnote. We're also using a dummy variable to control for the fact that where is the information disclosed if they refer to the accounting policies like of the company. In that case, again, like the information refers to the accounting policies. Or what we noticed as well, like the key audit matters, like in the auditors in reports, sometimes they refer to the audit committee report. So we're controlling for this type of thing. And the idea of all this is basically like, again, like the information is already like in the financial statements. So the only thing that the key audit matters do, they highlight basically the information that exists in the financial statements. And we're trying at the moment of the publication of the annual report, we're trying to control for all the noise that you're actually having in the annual report. Okay, so maybe it's time, if there are no questions.
I have a question.
Good.
Hey Andrew, um, so it's important to control changing fundamentals. For example, you compare this year with the previous year's CAM. The dissimilarity could be changes in the fundamentals of the firm. I know you have profitability risk control kind of gets to the fundamental of the firm, but we look at the dissimilarity between current year, previous year. So it sounds like it's changes. If anything, would that be more reasonable to control changes in firm profitability and the risk compared to previous year? Or another way, another control I'm thinking, can you control the dissimilarity of 10K, like for example, MD&A, right? Section of MD&A. The dissimilarity with this year with the previous years, same firm, you know, using the same measure, the way you measure it. So kind of a control firm fundamental changes in the firm fundamentals. Does that make sense? Similarly to across with the comparison with the industry peers, would that be also controlling profitability risk is like the differences, you know, between your focal firm and the industry peers? Should that be consistent with your main measure of the dissimilarity? Basically, you want to control the differences other than the CAM differences. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, and I'm thinking like out, and especially like controlling like for again this to changes in the firm profitability. I actually like it. I'm just looking. I don't think that we have change variables in our controls, because but the story is now we have some change variables, but not so many out. But the story is like, okay, if something is changing in the firm, then it's normal that in one way, like the auditor disclosure is changing the disclosure
Yeah.
that it actually is. So if I understand right, that's what you are saying.
Yes. Yeah. That's what within firm. If a cross firm comparison with the industry peer, it could be auditor effects. You know, the dissimilarity could be different style of auditors, right?
Again, the information is in the annual report, the
Yeah.
change, like, and that's not what we want to capture, that the firm is getting worse performance or better performance or thing like this. What we want to capture, it's like the similarity in in what the auditor is saying,
Yeah.
but the way
But it
the
could be
firm performance is measured. Yes,
yeah,
sorry.
I'm thinking about suppose I'm audited by PwC, you are audited, you are my peer, you are audited by KPMG, PwC, KPMG, the way they write a CAM is different, so that causing the dissimilarity. But it's not fundamental differences. It's not like the auditor have a totally different opinion. It's just the way they write their CAM is different. Does that make sense?
That's something else that we can do, and actually, like that's exactly like on Emily's desk. Now,
Yeah.
out what we can do, we can basically instead of comparing to the peers, we can compare like compute our similarity index, like based on the audit firm, like
Yeah.
how much, because that it's
Oh,
what we
exactly.
are
Yeah.
saying, it's the auditors that are like so instead of like looking at the peers, you look
Yeah.
at like how much Ernst and Young is different compared to KPMG
Yeah.
and think like this or so. That is
Right.
on our to-do list to like, but again, that is not changing the fundamental story that we're actually having
Yeah.
here.
So this is the opposite. It's like instead of changing in fundamental, something meaningful happening, that I'm just saying the dissimilarity just capturing the superficial thing, the differences. That's my
Exactly.
concern, right? It's instead of
Exactly.
economic differences, is the superficial
Yeah.
differences. Is that those are the things I'm thinking while listening. But I think if you can have a good control of it, it will be very interesting. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. It's fully appreciated and it's exactly in the line of our reasoning what we're trying. But again, you have a car model like market reaction. It's very difficult to control for everything like that is going, and
Yeah.
it's
I think
that's
the key thing is I think the control should be consistent. My take of it is the control, the measure of the control should be consistent with your test variable. If you're looking at the difference, it's the dissimilarity basically is you're taking the differences, right? In the more sophisticated way, taking the differences. So then the control somehow to me also should be taking the differences. Should be consistent in a way. Because the
that
return itself is return is kind of reflecting the changing in expectation, right? So that's also change. Investors changing in expectation. So then your control variable, test variable is all kind of getting at the differences, the changes, so that's the overall high
the
level of
main.
my concern of it.
I agree, and we're thinking about it. But my main thing here is like again, what are we trying to control here for? And it's basically like the profitability, firm profitability is changing, and that's I'm just thinking out loud here. But firm profitability is changing. This should not change basically the disclosure about the way the firm profitability is measured by the auditor's perspective.
That's true. What I'm saying
So
is, suppose there is a big differences like a restructure, firm restructured, right? Then auditor raised a lot of concerns. Um, then the auditor's CAM will reflect it. But the market reacted to it. But is the market reacting to the restructure, or was the market reacting to really CAM itself? Does that make sense?
that's a difficulty of because again, if you control too much, we're throwing the baby out like with the water, like out. If you don't control enough, and the main thing what we're trying to design, and we're actually working on this like the test or out a series of tests to make sure that what we actually have it's like how the market reacts to the key audit matters and not to the information contained somewhere else in the annual report. Like
Mhm.
that's what we're trying, and this is why we actually added like recently, like this the last bullet point that I have here, like trying to make sure, okay, do I reference a note? Do I reference an accounting policies? Do I reference like the audit committee report and how it is actually working? But yeah, your point is very well taken, and that's exactly like on our to-do list these days.
Sure.
So.
Thank you.
Are there other questions?
Yeah, sorry, it's
Yeah.
David Hardage here.
Yeah.
I'm not an academic. I actually work for the Queens. I work in Brisbane, Australia. So I work for the Queensland State Government Auditors in the public sector. So we audit state government departments and agencies and local governments. So CAMs are mandatory for listed companies. We don't audit any listed companies, but we audit a few government business enterprises. I'm involved in approving the CAMs and was involved in approving them in 2017. So we had a centralised process where they all got approved because it was all new. So we wanted some consistency, as in similarity between them. So we've got, for one example, we've got hospital and health services. We've got 17 of them across the state. So they basically all started off exactly the same. So they said, here's the template, tailor it a little bit. So so there is some similarity, and I guess we'll hopefully come back to it with some questions on what do you mean by similarity and working out what is dissimilar. But certainly that the starting point is a lot of similarity. And I understand the big four firms or the larger firms also had a centralized process, at least in each country, to make sure that there was consistency and not having, what one client going this way and another client going that way for no good reason. But yeah, still interested in your results, and I'll hopefully have some other questions coming later.
It's highly appreciated, and yes, and that is a basic debate, because if it's similarity, so we have the same type of disclosure for all the firms, well, why are we surprised that the market does not react to the information? Because it's like, and the counter argument can be made in that case, it's like simply like boilerplate and it's not company specific information. But that's not exactly what we do here. Yes, what you're talking, it's valid or so, and we do control for the audit firm characteristics, and that should wash out basically like the fact that the audit firm KPMG is having a template and it's using basically this template, and that is actually out. But what we're saying exactly like similarity index, like, and what we're trying to measure, it's exactly like we're trying to take out all these similar words that are used in between peers and in time, and keep basically focus in simple words, keep and focus only on like what is new in this, and what we're showing, like the intersection of the two. This is what the market reacts to. I anticipate a little bit by a couple of slides out of it. And thank you for the comment.
Andrea is Professor Mohammad Nurun Nabi. I'm based in Prince Sultan University in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. I did work with the regulatory bodies, different parts of the globe. The challenge I face, and I think you all agree, those who are in the industry and also the academics, I did two kind of activities. Number one, the governance reporting, and what my colleague mentioned now, it's it's just like, the company name is different and the people are different, but all other matters are similar. Nobody is, it's just like ticking the box, or like, okay, how many pages we have written, regardless the big size or the small size farms. But it's like, we always go to the classroom and say quality is more important than quantity, but nobody does look after this issue or talk about this issue, because as you all agree, the risk and the other issues should be industry specific, should be the company specific. I don't know where to start and where to finish, and who will take the control on that outside the research. But I think this is very, very valid point. Not only these audit issues, but also the reporting, the governance or the other issues. It's like copy and paste. And then what I did put all the report in the Turnitin. And guess what? It's like it's all are failed. Means more than 90% copied and pasted. Honestly, like, it really hurts us, So then give it to the chat GPT or AI to write the report for you. It will solve the issue, and it will solve the regulatory compliance as well. This is I think we need to discuss, and thanks to you bringing this important point. At least somebody is starting, like, because the literature and for the political and other issues, nobody talks on that. But this is the reality we are facing. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. And yes, I agree. And what we are trying to do, and there are these templates that the auditors seem to be using, although like the standard and the principle is like you should describe the risk of material misstatements in your own words. So it should be company specific. And when you compare in between companies and you see similarities, especially based on auditors, we're asking like, okay, how much is it like in your own words differently? And but again, what we are trying to say, like, okay, maybe it's normal to be like this, and that's the jury's out deliberating. We don't know like what's the best solution out of it, but in one way, it's maybe normal that it is like this. And we lived for, I'm just thinking out loud, that we lived for decades with a black white. So do I have a green audit or red audit like out of it? We live for decades. Now it's the first thing when you try to put a little bit more. And my only message is like, maybe we should not be surprised that the market is basically not reacting, because there are not new risk. There's I'm similar to the industries. And what the main message of this paper is like, okay, we should focus on the intersection of the two when the market is basically reacting. And the market does not need to react every time. So if there's nothing new or I'm similar to the other ones, for me, it makes perfectly sense that the market should not react out of it. But yeah, thank you for your comment. Okay, no other question? Good, so we're getting a little bit in the sample, and this is where, well, all the work is Emlyn's. It's part of her PhD thesis, and the beauty of a PhD thesis is that she had time like to go into data collection. And data collection, we did not take the data like to construct the dissimilarity metrics, basically like from a data set, because we found it's like noisy, and at that time it was not so clear. So Emlyn actually hand collected all the key audit matters for the period. And hand collecting it has the advantage that we're very, very sure about like the data and the way it was basically computed and collected and treated. The text was actually like treated like per key audit matters. So as I mentioned before, like we wanted to have like the longest time period possible. So we're like looking at the UK setting, like, and we started in 2013 and we ended up to December 2019. And we, as usually, like we eliminate like the financial industries. We eliminate like out of this this period like some firms that did not have basic key audit matters and the classical sample selection process. But we also like we were looking at the most, because we're not looking at, we don't include in the sample like the newcomes, or because then you don't have a dissimilarity. So we're reducing basically like the sample to the exactly to the companies that disclose the same come from one year basically to the other, so we can compute basically this dissimilarity metric. And what we do find, like after this, where our overall sample, it's like still like 1,251 observations. And if you look, it's a little bit distributed evenly in the period, and the number of comes more or less, it's maybe less in the first years, but afterwards it's like stable, like around like the number of comes. Now, what are these key audit matters, what they're actually talking about? And this is where the groups that we're actually like at the risk of material misstatements that the auditors identified in the financial statements, and number of firm year comes like over the sample period. And you see like This is why I was talking about like revenue recognition is number one. And the second one, the second most popular key audit matter, it's like a broader category of valuation of intangible assets, and especially like talking about like impairment of intangible assets, impairment of goodwill. That was one of the most topical items. And if we compare this like with the literature that is out there or with the reports done by the European Union, this is consistent basically like the, especially at least for the first two ones, the first three ones as well, like taxation, with the most key audit matters identified basically by the European companies. And you see like you have a total of 4,552, which goes basically like for 1,251 observations. So roughly speaking, around like 4 key audit matters per year and company out. Now, I don't know if I'm going to have time to go through all the tables. So just in case, like as a quick summary of like all the results, because we have plenty of tables, like, and plenty of tests that we have actually done. Overall, what do we find? Yes, we do find that at the end of the day, simply saying different things compared to the past, like, is not informative for the market. Simply like doing like using the same template for all the firms, what you mentioned basically in the comments received, is not informative down to the market. Being dissimilar, sorry, to the peers is not informative to the market. What drives basically like when the market is react is like the part in the center, like in between, when I'm having like I'm different over time and I'm different compared to like the industry peers. And we do afterwards like look at type of a cross-sectional test to see like when the results are basically stronger, and we look at certain audit characteristics, and the industry specialization seems to drive out like explain like this cross-sectional test. There are differences in between specialist auditors that are specialists in the industry and auditors that are not, like some company specific information, like linked to basically like the information asymmetry of the company. And we also look like basically at like the number of analysts that are basically following the firm. Then we do kind of like plenty of robustness tests. We look at newcomers, like comes that were actually dropping. We're trying to look, and I've seen a question that was about like on what window do we measure like the market release, the release of the report. We're trying to vary basically this window. We're looking at alternative measures of dissimilarity and a bunch of other robustness tests that basically confirm our main results that are actually here. Now, this is just in case I don't have the time to go through all the tables, but our main results are basically here. And what you have, like, well, column one, it's the benchmark, like only with all the controls that we actually have. What we use industry year fixed effect, which is kind of constringent, like industry and year fixed effects. And we talk about like exactly that part about like the same auditor using a template that should be controlled by the audit firm fixed effects that we basically include in the model. And what we do, we first, again, in column two, we're looking like, okay, if what I say, the interpretation of column two, it's like what I say compared to what I've said last year, is it changing? Is the market basically reacting? And the answer is like, no, it does not seem so. So it's like the result, the coefficient is not statistically significant at traditional levels. In column three, we're looking basically like, okay, if what I say it's different compared to the industry peers for the same type of risk. So for revenue recognition, if I say use different words, is the market reacting? So does the market consider this informative? The answer again, it's like, no, the market does not seem to react. If I put both together, they don't react. But only when the market is basically reacting is basically, and this is what we're saying, it's our main result, is when what I say is different to what I said last year. And what I say is different at the same time compared to what my competitors, the audit report, the key audit matters of my competitors, it's different. Then it's when we're having the market reaction. And to me, again, it does make sense if we want like key audit matters like to have additional information to the market. Well, it has to bring information basically like on the market. Yeah, there's a question.
Yes, thank you very much. My question is, since this is like the last column is the only one significant result, how many companies like, or how many firm your observation they have value of one for both dummy, because you have interaction. So because in many situations this is like a small number of unique firms. Is it the case for you?
Again, number of observation. By definition, this is why I use the dummy variable. It's 1/3 of the sample is in one side out of it. So we have 1/3, 1/3. I don't know exactly like the interaction of the two, how much is it like exactly, but again, if the sample is small, that would speak against finding results. Like out. And then we also use like you're going to see later in like in robustness tests. I don't know if I'm going to see like later the test. We also use the continuous variable. And we do have basically the same results that are systematic. And I'm thinking of Emlyn. I made her run so many tests, like with 1/3, 75%, 50%, 40%. So we always more or less get the same results. I'm kind of confident that there is something here. Like this is where the key audit matters are actually informative for the market.
So.
Okay. So this is basically, and however, like if you look a little bit at the R-square is jumping like by not so much, which it would be expected like the market reaction. It's only a 0.3% increase basically in the R-square when we do have this interaction effect that actually goes on. So the main takeaway, it's like the market is reacting when the auditor is saying something different compared to the previous year, and it's saying something different compared to the auditors of the competitors are actually saying in the key audit matters. Now we're thinking about, and I like the way I like to look at my papers. I'm having like the main tables out, and then we're trying to find like, okay, some cross-sectional evidence that how are the results varying depending on some hypothesis or some conjectures that we're actually making. And what we're looking at audit firm industry specialization, at the information asymmetry in the client firm. And again, one of the things that we're looking like a number of analysts that are actually like following basically the firm. Like this is where we decide to split the sample in two, and basically we're deciding to split the sample in between firms that have like audit firms specialized in the industry versus firms that don't have, and similar beta spread and number of analysts. What's the idea behind the first one, like audit firm industry specialization? The idea is that, okay, if the auditor knows the industry very well, so if the auditor knows exactly, is having plenty of clients in the industry, and he knows exactly like what are the main risk of material misstatements in the industry, well, in that case, what is saying is more informative to the market compared to somebody that I don't know, that I only have a client in an industry and out of it. And what we do, if we're splitting the sample again on the left, we're only taking into account like to look at auditors that are industry expertise, and we look at proxy in the literature like for the industry expertise. So column 1, it's like auditors that are like basically experts in the industry, and column 2, it's like auditors that are less experts in the industry. We do see that the main finding, so the interaction term is basically like significant in both subsamples, but the result is much stronger for the auditors that are industry experts. And the difference in between the two regressions, it's like significant at 5%. So at traditional level, the difference is significant. So it seems that the market reacts much stronger when the the auditors are actually like experts basically in the industry. Now, the next steps, what we're trying to do again, like type of like cross-sectional test, we're saying, okay, if people do not know much about the company, so what we're calling here, what we're trying to capture here about bid-ask spread or information asymmetry. So if there's not much information about the company and the auditors come with this, again, this is where we should expect a stronger market reaction. If basically like there's everything is known about the company, the bid-ask spread is low, like the information asymmetry is basically low, well, it's maybe natural that the market does not react, like because there's no new information to the market. And that's exactly what we find. The result is statistically significant at 1%, basically like for the companies where we have like that have a high bid-ask spread. And basically it's like statistically not significant for the companies that have basically like a low bid-ask spread, and the difference in between the two samples are statistically significant at 5%, like in between the two, the difference in coefficients. I see some discussions in the chat. Are there questions or?
It's okay. I'm answering the chat when there are questions. It's questions about like which software I used and some technical like questions about how I computed everything.
I just to make a point, because I've seen one of the comments, like I think that it's a strength, the fact that we hand collected the data. It's part of Emlyn's test, and that was the original reason out of it. But even nowadays, audit analytics, it's giving like some pre-formatted things, and it might contain errors, especially in classifying basically the risk of material misstatement, the categories of comes that you actually have. So hand collecting it makes me feel more confident about the results and the categorization that we actually have. I just seen like a little bit of discussion, and thank you, Emily, for.
Yeah, and sometimes there are some issues that in audit analytics they will put the risk description into the response, and it's hard to know where are the issues, but there are some. So, and since we focus on the text and we need to divide the response and the risk description, it should be well organized. Otherwise, the results will just be wrong. So, yeah.
I agree. So thank you for
Andrea, I have. Did you consider the joint audit issues?
We're in the UK, so
There's
our
no-
setting is UK.
Okay,
So
okay. Sorry, I missed that one then.
Yeah, we're not. That's exactly the beauty of the UK, because we don't have different type of like institutional settings. So we're focusing on one country, and we wanted to have the maximum time period possible. But yeah, nowadays we can redo
Then my
this at
last
European
point, you know,
data.
if you in the UK setting, you know, some industry is dominated by some of the audit firms. Did you consider those areas for seeing some similarity and dissimilarity or something like that?
Again, this is exactly what we're trying to capture here, like what we're calling audit firm industry specialist, like in this type of test. And we do control, like for audit firm fixed effects. So we do the best we can do that the results are not driven by this concentration of auditors in certain industries. And what we actually find, and exactly I'm looking at this test, that the market is actually trusting more, if you want, the auditors that are specialists in the industry. So that are dominating, what you're calling dominating, that would be like an industry specialist, like for the auditor.
Thank you.
I see some hands.
Yes, Andrei, thank you so much. Really interesting project. Just I wonder, you controlled now for audit firm. However, we have some prior studies in the UK prove that even audit partner characteristics also can affect the reporting of CAMs. So I'm not quite sure if you can consider or control for the partner.
We can introduce basically like a finer tuning of this audit partner. It's something that we could do, like out. Do this. So yeah, it's we just believe like at audit firm, because the idea, but yeah, it's true, it's the partner that is signing. But do we have Yeah, no, it's something that we can consider.
We
I'm
have
I'll
the
have to think
data
about it.
because I use it in another project with the same data.
Yeah.
I think this is important. If you notice also in some report, the same partner have the same report, just changing the name of the company. This is happening.
Yeah.
The second point related, if you allow me, please, I can see that you controlled for the Big Four. However, we have in the UK here the Big Four dominant the market. So I think more than 90% audited by the Big Four. So in this case, it might be, I'm not quite sure if you can drop Big Four and check the results.
We check. It's we included it, we excluded it. Like out. I'm looking at Big
If I may,
Four.
Andrei,
It's 93%. It's 93%. So yes, it's out, and the results are robust.
Most of the firms are audited by a Big Four. We include it in the statistics to show how many firms are audited by a Big Four, but it's not included as a dummy in the test because we have audit firm fixed effects. So the audit firm fixed effects will like it's the same as the Big Four dummy. So we just use the audit firm fixed effect instead of the Big Four. But we can compare also B2 like among the like all the audit firms and not just Big Four versus non-Big Four.
Yeah. Well, another point, please, if you allow me. I think if you check FTSE 100 and FTSE 200, you might find some differences. Also, there is evidence that CAM's reporting for FTSE 100 have some characteristics different from FTSE 250. So if you just have two subsamples, you might find something interesting. And the last point, I can see that the period of study starting from 2014. I think this is the first year of the adoption. It might be noisy. And 14 and 15, we used RMM, risk of material misstatement. So it might be good also if you can just have subsample from 2016, starting with the international standard using CAM. So having some sample 2016, 17, 19, this also might be interesting. And thank you so much.
We did this test, and like from what I remember, Emmeline, correct me if I'm wrong. We did run like the period, so the results do hold. Like that's the main thing. Now, if we want to eliminate too much like out of it, again, our sample is not so big. Like our overall like sample of 1,251. If we eliminate on the other hands, we end up like only with a bunch, and we can't update the sample like after 2020 because it's COVID, and then that would introduce more noise. And yeah, but that's exactly what we're trying to do through this cross-sectional test, like trying to compare different types of firms with different types of incentives that they actually have like in the financial statements.
Thank you.
So the 250, 500, that's something that we can consider, definitely.
Hi. Can you, I'm using a mobile phone. Can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Okay, good. I'm Dr. OJ. A lot of things have been said already, so I wouldn't go into much detail. I'm focused on the key premise, one of the key premises of the research, as well as terminology. Now, is it not possible to consider a situation where investors or the market does not change, but it's still a reaction? Because it is possible that a CAM was cited and understood by the market or investors, and that CAM has prevented the market from changing. So in that case, based on your research, or I've been on and off, but based on what I've heard, that is not considered as a change simply because the market has not changed. It's still a reaction. People actually reacted to the CAM, which stopped them from changing. So the terminology and the premise, those two may be challenged by somebody. Somebody can challenge them. Don't you think so?
Perspective. And what I would say, I'm not sure that we can answer that question, like out of it.
Do you want me to repeat
No,
the question?
I did understand the question. I'm just saying that I'm not so sure that we can answer the questions through what we are looking at in this paper.
Good, good. Good.
Like,
Good.
because we're having a different perspective on this. What we're
Yes.
saying, okay, what you're saying, okay, yes, the market would have reacted, but the come is actually something good, and it's calming the market down, and the market is not reacting.
Yes.
Can
Correct.
be an explanation. I
Yes.
agree, but this is not what we're testing.
I
So
know
maybe we
that.
need another paper for
No,
something like this, which is out.
I know
What
that,
we
but
are testing, I agree. Like, one of the explanations were the come, like maybe the methodologies of the previous studies are not wrong. It's one of the explanations. I see your point, but our paper is not about this. Let's
yes,
put it this way.
can I add something?
Yes,
Can I add
please.
something? Yes. Usually, there will be many people who will construe various things wrongly in a research. So I think a key premise, one of the key premises will be there to say that you are not actually testing. You're not actually including this in your testing. I think that should be part of your methodology. You should actually define the scope, obviously, so that people can see that you are not doing that. Or that is still unresearched, probably, if it is, and you are saying that you are not dealing with that, so that nobody's going to ask you that, no examiner is going to ask you that question, because you have defined your objective, you defined the area that you have covered. That is why I asked that question. Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. What we are, again, we're looking. Our main motivation of this paper is that people say that in general there's no like reaction or so, and we're just selling the paper differently, and we're approaching something else. And what we are saying, okay, roughly speaking, with the results, what we're trying to say, convincingly or not, is to say, okay, it's normal that you don't find, and we provide another reason, an alternative reason to what you're actually saying. We're just saying, okay, it's normal because it's basically you have the same information. The market knows, so the market does not react, or
Yes.
so, like in one way. But yeah, maybe the writing, it's work in progress. You know how it is. You work for years for a paper, like up to the moment, and every dot and every comma is well placed in the paper. So it's always room for better improvement. So
Sure. Under the methodology, it's good to state that you are not that. How will I put it? You state that reaction, the word reaction that you are using, does not include the situation that I've described. After that, then you just go on and research, because people know that obviously what you could term as reaction has been defined. So yeah, that's my point. Thank you.
We'll take better care of writing out of it. Okay. The last test, again, cross-sectional test. The idea is that, okay, if a firm, a little bit like similar to what we had before, a firm that is followed by plenty of analysts and is having like a high number of analysts, like this is basically informative. And if nobody cares about the firm, like in that case, like, well, the market reacts less, and or the need of information, if you want. And again, we do find like a statistical difference, although here it is a little bit like problematic, because most of the firm, like I don't particularly like this test, because most of the firms like this are like big UK companies. So most of them, they are followed by numerous analysts. So it's biased, and the number of observation in the first column, it's much higher. So to describe all the moles on basically this test, the number of observation in column 1 is much higher. The second one is like in column 2, it's much lower. But these are the firms that have like the biggest companies. They are followed by plenty of analysts basically in the UK. And we do find, again, I like it as a cross-sectional test, that we do find this variation in the results, in the sense that we basically expected out of it. Now, and we talked, and maybe like I'm not going to insist a little bit, go deeper, like what is like robustness test, and what we are looking like. I'll just present some of them, like to what we actually have. What we said, like, okay, because up to now we're saying like, and this part of new comes, we're like deleting them from the sample, but now we're like basically looking exactly at this new key audit matters and the dropped key audit matters. We were not computing because our measure was similarity in text. So we requested to have a text the year before. We requested to have a text this year. But what if like the CAM is completely new? out of it. And this is what we're trying to capture in the first version. So we're looking basically at like the new and dropped comes. Strangely, we don't have a market reaction. We don't have the same results for new key audit matters. But in one sense, where we do have results is like we do have the results like some evidence, I would say, that actually the market reacts when a key audit matter is actually dropped. So that's when you're actually, so the auditor does not mention it anymore, like in the audit report. That's where basically you're having basically like the market reaction. So we're trying here, like basically like the overall takeaway from this table, we're trying to replace this time version that we have with simply like, is it new or is it I give up basically like disclosing with this type of key audit matters. And yes, we had like, it's like at the publication of the annual report. So annual report like, and no, sorry, like we are using like this part of 1/3, which is a bit ad hoc, and we tried it with 0.5 because in the main results, economically, it's easier to interpret as 0.1 compared to a continuous variable that you actually have. But also, if we use like the continuous variable, the results are exactly the same. So which gives us confidence that the results are basically like what we actually have, and it's not simply because we cherry picked, let's put it this way, 1/3 of the sample to have like the dissimilarity index out of it. We also have like different types of windows because it's the annual report, the publication of the annual report. And what we have like here, we looked at +1, -1, the traditional things like, however, we vary the window around the annual report, we still get like significant results, like depending on the window that is actually there. So which gives us confidence that the results are actually robust to alternative event windows. And finally, and I think it's the last that I'm going to present, it's something that is hot in the sense that Emlyn sent it actually like this morning out of it. Like where we're trying to say like, okay, our regressions at the end of the day like are at a firm point of view. Let me just finish this one and I'll pick the question later, okay? Just immediately after. Like what we were trying to see here, it's again, it's like, okay, our measure of dissimilarity, it's like at level of the company, level of the year, so firm year observation, while at the end of the day, sorry, it's here. At the end of the day, we should run basically the regressions at the level of each key audit matter. And this is exactly what we're trying to do here. So the regression this time, it's not anymore like at the level of the sample year, but for each like key audit matter separately becomes basically an observation. We do have this type of results, but the results are kind of like a little bit weaker. But more interestingly, what we say like, okay, wait, but it's different because in this version, when we put everything together, you pull everything together, each key audit matters has the same weight in one way. But it's something different if a firm is having like 5 key audit matters and another firm is having 2 key audit matters. And the nice part about this, that this can be actually modeled like econometrically by using like weighting regressions, like we're putting in the weights in the first step, and in the second step, we're constructing the things and putting like the things in the second regressions. And I do like it that the results are like are still here. So even that we're looking at the level of the key audit matter, at the type of disclosures, the results are like with this type of weights are even stronger. If you look in column 3, we're having like a 3-star result, like basically like for the interaction of the two variables. And that's all the tests that I'm presenting. So there was another question. Other questions? I see 2 hands, so.
Yes, hi, sorry. I'm using a mobile phone. I'm struggling with the mobile phone. What I wanted to comment on is the statistical tests. There's a mentality that we have that every kind of research has to involve very complicated statistical tests. In my time, the argument was, and I still think that it applies, that audit falls within corporate governance. We measure behavior. It's not aimed at, your research should not be aimed at having very high statistical significance. If it happens, that's good. But nobody should disqualify your thesis simply because, for instance, you did not use fixed effects. No, it should not happen because this is corporate governance. We're measuring behavior. I mean, your behavior 365 days in a year, you've taken results of a year, that's 365 days data. Then you take another year, 365 days. So in my time, I took some years, about 5 years, and that was a lot in terms of corporate governance. So that's just the remark I wanted to make. It will take time. Yeah, it will take time for this to actually walk through, because I can see most people want to do complicated statistical significance. No, I don't think we need to do that. Yeah. Thank
This
you.
is what's called like the bias towards significance, and known in research, like we're searching for stars out of it, and I can see, like, it's, as an editor, I can see like it's not obvious how to deal like with this type, because it's like, I think it's coming from the training of our PhD students that we're forcing them to find results. So, but that's a world out there, like the world of academics. So.
Yes, at times OLS is okay, and then you use some other logic to.
Yeah, I agree.
Actually,
Sometimes we overcomplicate things when we can keep things simple. On that one, I agree as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, but you know how they say the reviewer is always right. If the reviewer is asking something, you do it, and that's one way. So to look at things. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Let me start by the slides that you present now. CAM level regression, this is really interesting. I'm not quite sure if you looked at CAM for each CAM and the giving weight, as you mentioned, or something else. We have in a previous study classified CAM into entity level CAM and account or transaction level CAM. So this might be more informative. It is expected that account level CAM can provide more informative value than entity level CAM. Entity level CAM might be related to internal control, something like this, that can be captured by other variables.
I know that there are some papers that are doing it where don't look at the distinction. Now that I mention it, I'm saying, like, why don't we do a cross-sectional test on this? I don't know. That would be a very interesting. No, what we're having here, all these comes are topic level. So it's entering, and that's exactly like here. It's like with equal weights, but we don't make the distinction in between account level CAM and entity level CAM. What we do, and you're calling account level CAM, we do control for the fact that the CAM is mentioning a footnote, which I would say in one way it's like account level CAM, no?
Yeah.
If you'd say footnote 17, then it's probably like refers to an account for it. So we're trying to control basically for this. But the cross-sectional test on this, that can be like interesting. But here what we're taking all the CAMs with equal weight, at least in this one. And then we're just trying to weight by the number of CAMs that the company is disclosing in a given year.
Yeah, good. Also, you mentioned that you looked at reference to the audit committee report. Did you use dummy variable 10?
So basically, if in the CAM, the company is referring to the audit committee report, the company, the auditor is saying something as per seen in the audit committee report, or as per, if they make a phrase like this, then we're trying to control to wash this out. And what's the idea behind? We're saying, okay, maybe the market is reacting like to the audit committee report in that case. So we're trying to control. That's the best what we can do, control for this type of circumstances that we actually have.
Let me share with you here something that FRC actually was interested about. The alignment between the risks reported in the audit committee report and the external auditor report, especially the CAM. So if you have a chance to look at the alignment, because not necessarily that all
Yeah,
auditors
that's
were
something
fair.
interesting.
Yeah. So this is big because also if there is something in the audit committee report, so the informative value here that you are looking at might be not driven by the CAM, might be by the audit committee report. Adding to this point something else, which is the negotiation or the discussion between the external audit and the audit committee and the powers that they have in identifying and selecting the auditor, identifying the audit fees. This also, I think, give priority to such an issue to look at the alignment between the two reports when you study that.
I think that's a super interesting topic, like out of it. Well, but that would be another project for me. It's like it's too much, like becoming already. It's like big, so.
Actually, there is already a paper on that published in TAR in 2024 by Gilad Livner, Maria Tsipoulidou, and Anthony Wood.
True.
So they are looking at this already.
Okay, perfect. Last point related to the going concern. I'm not quite sure. You know, in the UK, we have a separate section for going concern. Have you considered or controlled for having a section for going concern outside the CAM section? Because the number of CAMs related to going concern, I think it is 74 only over all years.
What we did, I do remember out of memory now, I do remember that we eliminated this comes and the results are robust, like for that, where we said like, okay, going concern is something major, so maybe something else is going on. So we like eliminated this and the results are basically robust. But other than this, do we have a control? I don't think that we have because the number is very, very small. And it's company, so.
Yeah, the UK standard 570, I think, mentions that there's a section.
Yeah.
I think.
Okay.
Yes, if that one, the auditor have a chance to report or to add a CAM or not, or to provide a comment on the going concern provided by the management or not. This also might affect the informative. But all in all, thank you so much. Yeah.
I agree. Something to maybe we should put a footnote somewhere that we've done it. Because again, this as there are very small number of cases, I do remember that we try to eliminate them and to make sure that it's not coming from. So I appreciate the comment. So
that's a great work. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, thanks. Look, having identified that dissimilarity from one year and from peers is informative, and I understand that when you sort of look at similarity, dissimilarity, it's I forget the term, cosine or something. So it sounds like it's some sort of algorithm. I'm just wondering, have you gone back to work to manually or visually identify why it's dissimilar? And I'm asking that because if it's informative, then maybe there's something there that we could get the auditors to concentrate. I guess you've talked about boilerplate, and I've talked about similarity and firms using the same sort of wording, at least within each firm. So to me, if it's dissimilar, it may well be tailoring, but I'm not absolutely sure. I'm just wondering if there's something there that we can bring out for the auditors, because the other thing in the back of my mind is that you found that a new CAM or a removed CAM was not informative or very weak, and they're sort of the once-off things, although they're already in the annual report. So it's mainly what can we learn to get the auditors to help a little bit more and make them more informative.
I'll just comment on, I agree, but I'll just comment like on the strengths and weaknesses of textual analysis. And the strength is that we can use it at a large scale database, and we can like capture immediately, have a metric and put it in regressions and draw some conclusions based out of it or so. Now for qualitative, that's the weakness of the tool that we're actually using, where we can't identify like what exactly I'd say. But the way I look at similarity, but if you want, especially if I compare to how different am I compared to others, I would define this similarity as company specific conceptually, that what it should capture, company specific information. How much about I talk about the reality of the company, and I don't talk about the risk in the air, the risk in the industry, the risk about like, oh no, this is related to the company. So implicitly I'm going to use words that are related to the company and that are different compared to the industry. That's the logic behind this type of metric. But as I said, like, yes, it would be interesting to look, but that would be like compare come to come and try to see. And the beauty of this textual analysis is that it's comparing it automatically, it averages, and you have like a coefficient here that I can put in regression and say like, look, I have 3 stars on it, like out of it.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe, you know, when you've got the under, I know you sort of separated into thirds or whatever it was and gave it a 1, but possibly, you know, the underlying data, you might have some ones with a bigger weight for dissimilarity that you know, that you use to put them into the different thirds that could be brought out. And then possibly all the chat GPT stuff to say, to tell me why they're all different or something. But no, that's good. Thanks.
Thanks. Well, maybe just to wrap up, because it's like, it's time, like, well, we have done a bunch of other, and the beauty of this project is that it's coming basically like from the work of Emlyn. So it was like a long-term journey. So we had time to look at different type of, and we're kind of like sure of the evidence that we're actually like presenting out of it. Yes, we have like, we believe that we have a contribution linked to this, exactly like this type of what we bring new to the literature, that we're looking at one specific risk. So we're isolating at the risk topic, and we're isolating like at the topic of the key audit matter that you actually have. And what we bring as well new, that I'm not seen in the literature, again, like this part of like time dimension, and this part of dimension basically like with the industry peers that you actually have. And I think that with this one, unless you have like other comments, I just want to thank you for your attention today. And thank you, Emlyn.
Thank you very much, dear Professor Andrei, for your contribution and your effort. It's really an excellent presentation and excellent paper. Thank you very much. And thank you very much, everyone joining us today. And if anyone have any questions, you can open your mic and ask your question. There is
all the comments and feedback. It was very interesting for me. So
yeah. Are there some questions? Someone asked about address indigeneity problem. Could you please explain how you addressing the indigeneity problem?
what indigeneity problem? If now depends on this is indigeneity, what type of indigeneity, and how which one exactly, like it's out. Now, if you refer to the fact that indigeneity in the sense that the market reacts to other things that not basically to it, the best thing that we can do is like basically control for it. Like
other question about the economic significance of the result.
Economic significance, again, it's small, but do you want it to be big? Like, because again, we're not talking about new information disclosed to the market. We're only talking about like highlighting the information that exists basically in the annual report already. The auditors are not supposed to disclose new information to the market.
Yeah, another point, someone suggests he wondering if include additional control variables like audit diversity, audit gender diversity, and auditor tenure.
Yes, we can also include that, like how much is it like linked to how different the words are basically. So yeah, gender for me, it's like a different project, a different type of like contribution, what it is. And tenure, I think that we're eliminating like new, when we have a change in auditor, I think that we're doing something, we're controlling for this, like if you have a change in auditor.
Someone asked about are there another series to support your hypothesis and your result?
other theories.
Mm-hmm.
Again, for me, and the strength and the beauty of this project, and we developed it with Emmeline when she came with the results and like how to interpret these results or so. For me, it's common sense. Like that's the beauty, like, and the strength of this, because again, it makes sense. You're not bringing something new. You're not bringing something new compared to last year. You're not bringing something new compared to the peers. Why do you want the market to react at the end of the day? So I'm not so sure that we need a very strong theoretical background for this, like for something that, for me, it's common sense. So
Another point, what you suggest for future research in this area?
that's changing. Like it's a changing area or so. So I think that there are plenty of projects, and I see this as an editor, that are coming now with critical audit matters, key audit matters, and especially like how it changed like during COVID times or things like this. It can be interesting to be studied. So, and the main thing is like, okay, we have now we're building like a kind of experience in key audit matters and critical audit matters. And I'll take, if you take a regulatory hat, like what have we learned from this experience? It's not so obvious.
Thank you very much. Are there other questions? If anyone have any questions, you can open your mic and ask your question.
Yes, I'm ready to
Yeah.
ask a question.
Yeah.
What I want to say, I want to commend Mohammed for the points he has raised. They are very important points. Your research has stopped somewhere, and your findings, you should actually, the economic significance is very important. You're supposed to have done that or given a hint about that prior to your statistics and all that. Okay, that is very, very important. Also, research, especially at PhD, must be facilitated by theory. It's not allowed at all to just research and say it's common sense. That I'm speaking my mind. I'm not trying to say that everything has to be done this way. But for me, I do not see any supervisor that is going to recommend that you research without the theory. That will be very, very serious at PhD level. Okay. Another thing is, I got another point. Okay, maybe I hold on and then you comment, then I can ask again. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, I just not to disagree completely. I agree theory is important when you do research or so, but sometimes descriptive evidence is very interesting. And again, I speak maybe like as the editor of a journal that is like having as an aim and scope to contribute to the policy debate. Regulators are usually interested in descriptive evidence, and this is what they want to have on the table. And when we want to take a contribution, I think that's exactly what I find interesting. And maybe I'm biased because I come from this world where research is useful for regulators to take them decisions. So not necessary and I agree, I don't disagree with that theory is important. Theory is sometimes important, but sometimes like a simple descriptive study, it's very important as well. That's all my comment.
Yes, for instance, you talk about information asymmetry. That is typical agency theory. So anyway, I think it's very important. Even at master's level, I wasn't allowed to actually start the research without knowing the theory that facilitated the research at that time, master's level. But PhD level, I don't advise any student to go and face the examiners. I don't even advise any supervisors to let the student go without the theory and face the examiners. Honestly, that would be very, very difficult. There's another point I wanted to make is when you want to research, there should be a gap that you have identified. Okay, because without a gap, there is no research, no need to research if there's no gap. Just leave it. So your gap should be highlighted when you present. This is the gap you have identified. It's not compulsory you fill the whole gap. This gap I've identified while I was trying to start the research. However, the data available also so will cover this gap, and therefore this research falls within so. And then when you get your results, you have to do the throwback. The throwback is throwing back to the literature review, okay, to see how your work, first of all, has filled that gap, and you compare your results with those in existing literature. People who differed from your opinion or your results, why they differed, people who had similar results and probably drew some slightly different conclusions. And then you can also do work on what Mohammed said. What is the future? What do you advise people? Because people will read your report, read your thesis, and then on that basis start to work on a different theory, something more than, different thesis based on what you have given to them. So you should always do what Mohammed's points were key, just wonderful, because you're not going to stop the thesis there and say you have finished your work. No, you must talk about what you expect in the future, because when you have objectives, there are some you could not fulfill, although you put them at the beginning. You have to express yourself that, look, I could not actually fulfill this part of the objectives because I didn't have the data. So it doesn't mean you have failed. You have made it clear to the examiner you did not actually succeed in doing that. And then people who want to research further will look at your report. Okay, all right, this part of the gap is still remaining. Let me make my research, my new research based on that. So those are the key points I wanted to talk about.
Okay, thank you for your feedback.
Yeah.
Comment?
I finished. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Are there other questions? If anyone have any questions, you can open your mic and ask your questions. Thank you very much, dear Professor Andrea, for your contribution and your effort. Thank you, everyone, joining us today. And thank you, Emilia. Thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Have a nice weekend.
Yeah,
Bye.
and I hope to see you soon in Egypt. You are very, very welcome.
Hopefully. Thank you. Nice
Thank
day.
you. Thank you as well, Andre. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.